Just a quick agenda for the next 30 minutes or so. I'm going to start off with some quick introductions, which I will do right away. So my name is Paul Stas. I'm the Director of Sales here at Strongpoint. Appreciate you again taking the time to join us. A lot of the folks on the call today are new to Strongpoint, so I'm going to begin by just giving you some context, giving a quick overview of what it is that we do and how our tool can be used to help people make changes more quickly and effectively inside Salesforce. From there, I will segue over kind of into what we'll try to cover for most of the session today, which really is JIRA and how Strongpoint can complement your current JIRA change management process by providing some additional information and details inside your issues. So I will kind of jump in and talk a little bit about what we see typically in terms of gaps and how we can help. I'll jump into a product demo. And so similar to the couple slides that I'll cover, I'll very briefly show you a little bit about Strongpoint and what it looks like inside Salesforce. And then I'll jump into JIRA, show you what it looks like directly inside JIRA. And then I'll come back into Strongpoint and show you kind of how they come together towards the end. So if there are any questions along the way, please feel free to put them inside the chat box. I will either make time to answer them at the end, or we can circle back by email at the end or after the session if we don't have enough time. So we'll get started. So what's Strongpoint? So I like to use a variety of analogies, but one of them is a Jenga tower. So Salesforce orgs, as they get increasingly customized, get increasingly difficult to manage. You lose visibility to customizations, you lose visibility to dependencies. There's multiple people making changes, and it really is difficult to keep track of. So like this Jenga tower here, the taller that it gets, the more that you build, the wobblier that it becomes, until eventually somebody pulls out the wrong brick and something breaks. So that's really kind of like the root cause that Strongpoint tries to solve for. And so we give you visibility to customizations and dependencies. We then give you a full suite of tools to effectively manage change on the platform. So what does that mean? It means things like risk and impact analysis, change requests and approvals, change policies, automated deployment, environment comparison, as well as reporting and governance tools. So really try to be as end-to-end as we can. And then organizations use us in a variety of different ways depending on their requirements. That's kind of what Strongpoint is: managed package, native to Salesforce, all directly inside, really easy to manage. So we'll segue now kind of into JIRA. So, JIRA is a very robust tool, super popular. I've even heard of people using it to do crazy things like buy groceries and track what they need at home. But when it comes to managing changes to a customizable cloud-based platform like Salesforce, or like NetSuite, which we also do, but like Salesforce today, what we really hear is that sometimes there's a lack of technical details within your stories or within your issues. And so, a ticket is created or an issue is created, and then people go and look and actually start trying to work it through its process, and they need to kind of fill in some gaps from a technical perspective. And so that's kind of the first gap that we see. And what that results in is that a lot of organizations don't have a great process for impact analysis, taking time to understand what's being changed, the impact that it could have downstream, and what risk is involved. And then as a result of that, they also don't really have the ability to perform resource allocation. And so what we mean by that is that, is this change technical, or is this change, more simple, and can it be done, with clicks, not code? And depending on the answer, the project should really be routed to different types of people depending on the size of your organization. And there's really kind of, because you don't have the technical details, it's difficult to get to that point. And what results from it is that a lot or all changes are created equally and treated equally. And so you'll have somewhat simple changes going to very technical people, going through kind of a full-blown CI/CD process, when actually it could have been done much more quickly than that. Faster turnaround time, smaller backlog, better overall adoption from the team. So, that's kind of a big gap that we see. And then, to the same tune, I guess, deployment processes often aren't linked with your JIRA issues. And so what I mean by that is that, the tools that are used, the processes that are used to actually deploy changes can be done independently from your ticket. So whether your ticket is fully approved for release or not, it's possible that people can go off and make changes or make the requested changes ahead of time, which potentially leads to issues, obviously. And then the final point here is almost like the flip side of that last bullet there, is that a lot of organizations struggle with manual reconciliation of audit logs back to originating tickets. And so they're going through audit logs and they're trying to figure out, okay, well, this change was made as part of this ticket, as part of this ticket, as part of this ticket. But what almost inevitably happens is that you end up also with a lot of changes at the end that you just can't link back, and you don't understand, why were these done and what project were they linked to. And from an overall platform administration or from governance perspective, that's a really big gap. You need to have that. So not only is it a bit broken because it's manual and it's time consuming, but it's also risky, because how can you keep track of these changes and which ones are important and which ones are not? So that's kind of, at a very high level, some of the gaps that we see with the organizations that we work with. And from there, that's really where Strongpoint comes in, because it's going to add a lot of this information inside your JIRA ticket and help you really streamline the process involved with managing change in Salesforce directly from JIRA. So what I'm going to do quickly for those that are brand new to Strongpoint is jump in, give you a very brief overview of what this looks like, and then I'm going to flip over and I'm going to show it to you inside JIRA, and then bring them both together towards the end. So I will hop out here. So as I mentioned, Strongpoint is a managed package built inside Salesforce. Once you install us, we'll automatically index all of the customizations, so all of your metadata, and we'll map out all of the dependencies between them. On this screen, you can see a very quick summary of that. So inside this org, for example, I have 31,284 customizations and a total of 36,937 dependencies, and yada yada, the list goes on. So great visibility to what's inside your system. And then we give you a couple really good ways to kind of access that information. So a couple quick examples. The first one would be our dependency relationship diagram. And so I'm going to use an example kind of throughout this demo. So the example is going to be that somebody has requested changes to 2 pick lists on the account object. Okay. So with Strongpoint, I can quickly hop in here. I can look at the account object. The first one that I want to see is this company social media field. So this is a multi-pick list that's owned by Rick Rosler, and it was last used on September 21st of 2018. I can see that it's really not connected to much. So it's connected to one report. Very simple. Maybe this report's being used. I might need to dig into it and see who it is and who it belongs to and so on and so forth. But this is a really simple change and should go through a fast path as much as possible. So a second example, however, also on the surface, identical. A multi-pick list, it's also owned by Rick, a very similar date last used, but a quick look at downstream dependencies shows how complex it actually is. So it's connected to some reports, it's connected to an Apex class here, as well as a couple workflow rules and an approval process. So this change should not follow the same path as this change. And ultimately, that's kind of one of the things that Strongpoint helps answer is, can I change this? Or if I change this, what will break? And so inside Strongpoint, we do have our own change request and approval capabilities. Very kind of typical, I guess, at the surface, where you provide an overview or your story and what you're trying to do. But then what's unique about us is that you're actually going to specify the customizations that are in scope for change. So, this is a project where we have to change 2 pick lists. And here I've actually added those 2 pick lists into scope. And down below, what we're doing is automating an impact analysis for you and showing you that, these 2 pick lists cannot actually be safely deleted or modified. We're seeing that company social media field has a dependent list viewer report, and it actually just lists it off as well as the source itself. The maintenance type, on the other hand, has dependent scripts as well as dependent list views and reports, and it's got all of these other things that are listed off for you as being dependencies that are critical for you to look at. So this really does streamline your approval process. You can do this all natively inside Strongpoint. You can see that there's the approve button for me here, and there's workflows that we can set up for you. However, we're here to talk about JIRA today. So after I've now shown you this, I'm going to hop over and show you what that same process would look like, but from JIRA instead. So if I create an issue here, for example, a quick summary of it, changes to pick lists for the sales webinar, a quick overview, you know, the company's social media field and the maintenance type field need to be changed. So, you know, you would obviously probably have something more robust, and your interface or your issue would look a little bit different than ours here. They're quite vanilla for the purposes of this demo, but you get the idea. And so I've just opened up that issue that I created. And now what you're going to see here is that under the comments tab, I can actually open up Strongpoint for Salesforce. And if this was your first time logging into Strongpoint for Salesforce in this day, it would ask you to log in, but I've already logged in, so it doesn't ask me to. And so what you can now see here is a somewhat, while the interface looks different, obviously, similar functionality to what we do that's unique in our own change requests, where you can actually add in customizations. So I'm seeing here that I'm synchronized with this environment. I could change that if I needed to. And if I come in here and I put in, say, that maintenance type, and I go to add that, it's going to give me the options that come up. So I can do kind of a fuzzy search if I only put in maintenance, for example. I can view some additional details here, like the type or the API name. But all I'm going to do here is quickly select this and add this customization into my change request, or into my issue rather. And then the next one is this company social media field. I'll add this in. Again, this one pops up, so I'll add it in. And I'm going to push this. And so what this has now done is created a new change request inside Strongpoint for me automatically, so inside Salesforce. And what I can do directly from my JIRA ticket is access some of that information that I was showing you previously. So for example, I can view my DRD. And if I want to look at the company's social media field, I can pop it up. And here's what it looks like. So I can see within JIRA that, you know, this is a multi-pick list owned by Rick, and these are its dependencies. Very straightforward. I can also do the same thing for the company's social media field. Sorry, just dragging it over from my other monitor. And so here I can see, whoops, I clicked on the wrong one. So I can also do that for the maintenance type rather. And so here I'm now seeing much more complex downstream dependencies, just like we saw inside Salesforce. I'm seeing that this multi-pick list is connected through to these reports, scripts, APIC classes, workflows, so on and so forth. So now if I close this out, I can also access the impact analysis, which also pops up in a separate window for me here. And so I'm seeing a very similar look and feel to what I had inside that JIRA, inside our Strongpoint change request, where I can now see that these things cannot be safely deleted or modified, and it's giving me a breakdown of why. And so I don't want to get into the details here, but these warnings are all created based on customizable policies that you can put inside Strongpoint. And so it will tell us, or it will tell you, you know, what type of risk is acceptable, what changes are acceptable, and which ones not, and need approvals and review, and so on and so forth. And that's really what's going to determine this impact analysis. And then directly inside this ticket, it's also going to show you, as an example, the policy that's being violated. And so here we just have a very simple default policy, but this could say something like financial reports, if you've got a series of financial reports that you're trying to protect. So variety of ways that this can be used, and that's kind of a topic for a different day. But the idea again here is that once you've now pushed this and we've created this change request, this has now been created directly inside Strongpoint within Salesforce. And so if I now pop back into Strongpoint and I go to our change requests, I'm going to see that change request that I just created. And I can actually open it up here. And I can see that all of that same data has now been created here. And I can see that you know, the control level required is that we need a change request. It's at its current stage, and so on and so forth. And all of that same impact analysis is available here. So what's also very neat though, and kind of circling back to some of the issues that we saw earlier, is that coming back to JIRA, you know, I've now been able to perform at least an introductory impact analysis directly from my ticket here. And I already have an idea of the level of complexity, the level of risk, and the technical involvement that I might need, because when we looked at this DRD and we looked at the impact analysis, we saw that it's connected down to Apex classes and workflow rules and so on and so forth. But now if we kind of fast forward a little bit and we update the status of this ticket to being done, And I'll push that for good measure. What we're now going to be seeing when we come back into this is that instead of seeing kind of this breakdown, when I open this up, it's automatically going, or when I refresh this rather, it's going to automatically update the status of this ticket. And so you can now see that this is completed. And because it's completed, I'm now also able to deploy. And so I now am working within Strongpoint with an approved change request because of the approval that came through JIRA. And I could now click here and I would be able to log into my source environment. I would be able to log into my target environment, and I would automatically be able to deploy those changes with rollback. And so I think the third bullet point that I had there on that initial slide about gaps is that there's often a disconnect between the JIRA ticket and your deployment processes. Whereas with Strongpoint in place, that's no longer the case. So this deployment button, as you saw, only popped up after this was approved. And you can see here, for example, on this other change request, that it's not approved, there's no deploy button up here. And so that's kind of bridging that gap, allowing you only to deploy using our tool once your JIRA ticket has been approved, right? So that really does bridge that gap. Now, the last point that was on there is really around kind of tracking, reporting, and the manual reconciliation of audit logs back to the originating tickets. And so if your organization is, trying to track changes that are happening, trying to put in place or manage or work within a kind of governance framework, whether you're publicly traded, subject to SOX, work in healthcare, somewhat of a regulated industry, whatever it is, that can be really challenging and time consuming. You don't want to waste your time going through the audit log and trying to link it back to tickets. So with Strongpoint, however, what you can do, so I'll just come to this screen to show you, is that once our documentation tools are in place, we are automatically capturing every change that takes place inside the system. And I'll just give you an example here. So if I pull up this maintenance type pick list again, and I go into the customization detail record that Strongpoint has actually created in the background, I will be able to navigate through to a list of change logs that we are creating. And so, there's definitely kind of some overlap between what is available inside the audit log. But what you're seeing here is a big long list of changes that have taken place. And for each one of them individually, we are creating a change log. So I'll show you that quickly. I'll use this one as an example. So here we're seeing that, a change was made today at 1 p.m. You can tell that we were getting ready for our webinar. And it was a change to the maintenance type pick list. And if I scroll down, I'm actually going to be able to see an overview of the change, including kind of like a full diff of what was added or what was removed. Up to and including like side-by-side comparisons of them, okay? But you can see up at the top here that we flagged this as being non-compliant and it's not linked to a change request. And so that basically means that somebody came in and made a change to this in production and it was not linked, as I said, to a change request. It violated one of the policies and therefore it was flagged as being non-compliant. However, if I come back in here again, sorry, I got lost for a second there. If I come back in here again, you can see that we do have one up here at the top that has that nice pretty green flag for you. And so if we dig into that one a little bit, we'll see that it's got very similar information in that, time-stamped, date-stamped record of change, a summary of kind of exactly what was done, including, a diff that's highlighted for you there and side-by-sides. But up at the top here, what we're also seeing is an automatically created link to the external change request. So we can see that this change was made as part of this project, and it's got a green compliant flag because it was approved before it was deployed. So Strongpoint automatically recognized that, this was included inside a change request and that change request was approved. And therefore, when we automatically created that diff, we automatically linked them together. And so for a lot of organizations, that dramatically saves time. So you no longer need to do that manual reconciliation. But now what's also more important is that it gives you great tools for monitoring for exceptions. So I'll show you just kind of one quick example here. So we have a variety of reporting tools helping you track what has changed. So if we look at, for example, a series of audit related reports that we have, We do have kind of just like standard what changed reports that just show you everything. But then we also have what we call an unresolved non-compliant change report. And so what this is going to do for you, and all of this is customizable as well, or most of it is customizable because it's all within Salesforce. But what this is going to do is only generate a report for you that shows those red flags. And so if something is changed in production, if something is changed in production and not included in a change request, but it should have been, then we would automatically bring it up here for you. And so all of these are individual change logs, just like the one that we showed you, with a summary of diff and a place for you to now start tracking and resolving these. So instead of focusing on linking change requests, instead you can look at only the change requests or only the changes that were made that weren't included in change requests. And I've kind of alluded to them a couple times now, but the policies that we have running in the background, it's really something that violates a policy that makes it non-compliant. And so, for example, you can have a policy that says that people can make changes to fields and list views and reports and things like that. And unless there are dependencies, those things don't get flagged as non-compliant because it doesn't violate your policy. Whereas more complex changes to permission sets, critical settings and preferences, changes to scripts, workflows, Apex classes, approval, whatever the case may be, or even just, specific objects that maybe are very critical to your business. Those are the ones that are going to be captured as being non-compliant. And so now what you can do is spend your time reviewing only the high-risk changes that didn't follow your standard process. It dramatically saves time, especially if you're looking to be operating in a compliant way or within a governance framework. So at a really high level, that's kind of what we wanted to cover today. I will pause for questions, and if any come up, there's either the chat box or the Q&A that you can drop it into. I'm happy to sit here and discuss. I'll give you just kind of a quick second. So my wrap up, while anybody types in any final questions, is basically, I hope that what we showed you today is how we can add in more technical details. And so I'm talking about really like customizations and dependencies. How can we add those into your JIRA tickets? How can we put in place an automated process for impact analysis, allowing you to better understand the complexity of changes? How can we link your JIRA issues or your JIRA tickets with your deployment processes so that you can't deploy unless it's approved? And then how can we really automate the tracking of it all? So not only the reconciliation of change logs back to your JIRA tickets, but also the identification of things that happened outside of your JIRA tickets. Okay, we do have one quick question that I can address here. So the question is, how is this installed inside JIRA? So very good question. Pretty simple process. We are available on your JIRA marketplace. You can download us, install us. We help you with it, and we fit into inside your existing configuration. And so I showed you our JIRA, which for this example is quite vanilla, but we wouldn't impact any of your existing tools or processes that are already customized and built there. And it is something that we do help you with. And then, there are a few different ways that we can kind of tweak this if required. So that we make sure that this really does fit inside your change process and that we're not dramatically changing anything to add in these details. Okay, and so it looks like that is it for questions. So I hope that means I did an excellent job explaining all of that. Next steps really, if this is something that you're interested in, would be happy to walk you through more of our capabilities. Just to kind of summarize what I said earlier about Strongpoint, managed package, system documentation, cleanup and optimization, a whole suite of tools to help you manage change more effectively on the platform, and also governance tools to help you keep track of them and report back on them. So hope that makes sense. Thank you everybody for joining. We will send out an email with a copy of this recording if you do want to share it with anybody, and we hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.